Hello and welcome to another episode of the Self-Made Podcast. On this episode of the show, I speak to Samantha Mcgowan. Sam is generally one of the most inspiring people I've met in the industry. Formerly a marketer for and social media manager for companies like MyProtein and for Ultimate Performance, where we both used to work and where I met her. She's now transitioned to be a personal trainer herself. But one thing I think is very, very honest and interesting about Sam is she's very open about her own stories, her own struggles, her own successes. She's battled social anxiety quite a lot throughout her life, and despite that has managed to get out of her comfort zone time and time again, whether it's through traveling, going on ultra marathons, doing triathlons, learning to swim, and we cover all these things in the episode. So if you're someone that feels like trapped and lost and unsure of how to step out the comfort zone and make these big goals happen, Sam is a really, really interesting person to speak to. We talk about how to transition away from a career that was very, very stable and potentially fairly lucrative into the world of coaching and this unstable world, and how she's learned to make that work, as well as all of her physical challenges along the way. So I'm going to leave you with myself and Samantha Mcgowan. So, Sam, it's really good to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I don't know if you saw the live I just posted, Inflating Your Ego. But generally, I think one of the most inspiring social media pages I generally follow, because it's so honest, it's so real, and it's you're out there doing stuff and getting stuff done and going about the pros and the cons of it. So, for people that don't know a bit about you, tell us a little overview of who Sam Mcgowan is.
Okay. Well, hi, and thank you for that. It's very kind. Hard to know where to start. I guess if I go backwards a little bit, right now I'm living in London. I moved from Manchester in January. It's now December. Finally feeling settled. But I'm coaching. I'm a strength coach part-time at the Foundry, and I then run my own business and my private clients. I have an online strength subscription. I have I sell my program, so I have that online business, and then I'm a strength coach part-time as well. But going back, that obviously hasn't happened overnight. We know each other through UK. My first introduction, I guess, to the fitness industry was at Ultimate Performance in marketing. So I wasn't a PT, and that was only, I want to say that was only like 5 years ago that I actually started there, which is mental when I think about it, because then I was in marketing and I wasn't a PT, hadn't even thought about becoming a PT of any kind. So to think, to look back at that now actually is crazy. But I was a gymnast from the age of 6. I loved sport. I loved any sport, but at gymnast I competed quite high level. And I guess that's where I've always had been active and enjoyed that, but had absolutely no knowledge and hated the gym with a passion. So I guess when I started working at UP and they started to teach me things and I started to enjoy it, that's kind of how it all happened. And honestly, like, without giving you my whole life story immediately, I've basically just gone from hating the gym, not having a clue, to currently where I am now. I'm a strength coach and online coach. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. It's very, very hard to describe that quickly.
It's always a tough question, right? But we're looking at unpacking. Obviously, gymnastics seemed to be the place where this really started out, and I think it's an interesting place to sort of delve into. We spoke about off air about talking about getting out your comfort zones and living life, and there's so many instances that we can talk about in this episode. But I always think, like, looking back, if there's one sport I wish I'd done, it was probably gymnastics. I think it teaches you so much from it. What is it about gymnastics that appealed to you over potentially the other sports that you did? And what did going through that process of gymnastics at high level teach you that you've taken on to your adult life?
You know what, even to this day, when I think about gymnastics, I get emotional. It's something that it changed my life. To give you a bit of context, I started when I was 6, and at the time I was I want to say I was an only child, maybe just about getting a sister, something like that. And I didn't grow up with money. I lived in council estates. Didn't live in the best area, didn't go to the best school, but into gymnastics as early as I did took me on a completely different route to where I would have gone had I have not done that. Gymnastics also isn't a cheap sport, so I was lucky to be able to get into it before, essentially when my parents split. That is when we then really didn't have any money. But luckily I managed to get into gymnastics before that. And when we couldn't afford it, I was already in a place where my gym, I was so lucky to have them. I was already in a good place. So they actually kind of kept me on. And so even though I couldn't afford it, they kind of looked out for me, and it meant that I was able to carry on. That I cannot, at the time, I was obviously thankful for it, but you don't realize how much that's going to impact your life. And for me, gymnastics, it's one, like the training sessions alone, you're there for 4 to 5 hours at a time. So even to be able to show up to something like that once, let alone 4 or 5 times a week, on a Saturday we train from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. And the commitment that goes into that, even you have to love something to want to do it that much. And the people that you end up training with, and you are training individually, but you're part of a squad as well. And to learn anything in gymnastics, it takes hours and hours and hours of practice. It takes a lot of falling. It takes a lot of hurting yourself. You get good at falling. You have to be comfortable with falling on your head. You have to be comfortable. I was a bit of a nut job as well. I didn't care. My edge was that I would go for stuff. My edge was that I would be higher than anyone else. I would jump further than anyone else. That you can't get that anywhere else. And I think that's a little bit of a side note, but that's why I think sport is so important for kids growing up. Just that commitment, the drive that you learn, learning what happens when you work hard. I think hard work is hard, right? It's obvious. But when you have been, especially from a young age, when you've been working hard and you see the results and you see what happens when you work hard, it's just ingrained in you from then on. So it doesn't matter what it is, it rubs off onto the rest of your life, whether that's relationships or your career or at school. For kids, if you're taught that putting in a bit of effort and working hard, and also coming from the bottom as well, things don't come easy. And I think all of the lessons you learn, not just with gymnastics, but with most sports, if you're competing fairly high level, you have to show up, you have to put the effort in, you have to be willing to suck and try until things start to go right. So yeah, I think that's the big thing for me. I hope one day I will have kids and they will obviously be doing not necessarily gymnastics. I would love that, but if I can't encourage it enough to anyone with kids to get them doing something.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for me, my equivalent was rugby, playing rugby from the age of 8 years old, and it taught me so much about learning how to be in a team. It taught me respect. It taught me, similar to yourself, it's like discipline. And for me, people don't believe this speaking to me, but I was a very introverted child. Despite being loud, but I was loud to try and get myself heard because I was quite inclusive. I was an only child, didn't really go out and speak to people, quite shy. And rugby taught me that. And when I look back at children who did sport in my school and children that didn't, there's a big correlation where those people actually go into maybe more challenging careers, go and travel, go and do stuff, because they start to learn how to be social. They don't fear that. They don't always want that sort of safety net of home life. And so we'll kind of cover it maybe in a bit more detail later on, but you mentioned being very open about social anxiety and things like this on your page a number of times. Do you feel that like being in a sporting environment from an early age has been maybe the difference maker in being able to push through more often than not when you are feeling anxious, because you've got that sort of familiarity around people and teams and things like that, compared to maybe if you hadn't done sport, you might have fallen back for it a little bit more?
I think there are a lot of things that have made me who I am. Yeah, sport is 100% one of them. In some ways, doing gymnastics all my life, not going out, not being involved in many social events, not going. I didn't go to college or uni. My parents were never really drinkers or anything like that, so I just wasn't bothered about going out. So in some ways, social anxiety comes from not doing those things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know. I guess I've always I've learned. I've learned the hard way. I talk about how I deal with things now, but I haven't just got here. Like I said before, like I didn't just get here overnight. I guess I moved out when I was 17. I've then been working full time since that age as well. So I didn't do college or uni. So it kind of has meant that I've had a lot of life already. I'm 30 now, so I know that's not old, but at the same time, I have experienced a lot, and I was hit with depression from quite actually, because I stopped gymnastics. One of the reasons it came about was because I had to stop for a bit. I had to get a full-time job to pay my bills. I had to start thinking about my career and whether or not gymnastics was actually gonna, I wasn't lucky enough to have money coming in to support me, so I had to earn it myself. So I've sat when I lived. I remember in Crewe when I first realised that there was something wrong. I was sat. I lived with people I worked with at the time, and I remember just crying my eyes out in a dark room for several days, like not really. And I was always quite a social person, like really good with people. Like I was always the team captain at the gym, and was always like the leader and the one who would speak out and all that stuff. So to then start feeling like that, it was really strange. And obviously at the time I had no idea what was going on. I remember going to the doctors eventually and just being like, what's something wrong with me? And they wanted to put me on medication. And I was only 17, and I have a bit of my without sharing too much. Like my mum has always been on a lot of medication for as long as I can remember, all kinds of things for all kinds of stuff, and stuff that I personally, now I know more, think could be prevented with better health, more activity, better nutrition, that kind of stuff. So I've always been against taking medication, even if I've got a headache, I will try and go without taking painkillers, that kind of stuff. So when I was told, we want to put you on, antidepressants, I was like, I'm not doing that. So I actually changed my job at the time to allow me to go back to gymnastics because, again, as I know more now, going from doing sport my whole life to stopping it immediately, I was literally having withdrawal symptoms from not exercising, not having the endorphins and not having that release, as well as then taking on, I was working in outbound sales when I was like 17, which as a young female with little experience, like that was intense. So I've gone through all of that to then learn and understand, and even now I'm still learning. I've sought help. I haven't done it alone. I've not figured these things out by myself. I've always been quite happy to ask questions and to reach out for help and not do it alone. As much as I like to think I am independent, I also think independence comes from learning. You can't just know these things. So yeah, I'd say that there's a long answer to your question, but these things don't just happen overnight. That stuff never goes away. Social anxiety, depression, your mental health is always there. It's just you learn how to manage it better over time. It like with anything, it never really goes away.
I think it's really important that is highlighting the fact that people should seek out help. And it's one of those things with mental health. It's still such an under talked about area. It's still such a a grey area people feel, and in both genders, but I certainly think in men they feel ashamed to speak up, or it's weak, or it's strong. It's not strength to be vulnerable. Where I'm very much the opposite end of that spectrum, in thinking that being able to be truly vulnerable and being okay with that allows great strength. I think is good about your message how you speak about social media. I see a lot of things now. We're starting, to see more and more people speak up about their mental health struggles, which is fantastic. And I see that there still needs to be much more of that. As you say, like the reliance on medication, or people maybe not wanting to seek out help, is really, really important. But what I've realized from living with a fiance with obsessive compulsive disorder and seeing the struggles that she goes through on a day-to-day basis is, like, there's a lot of people talking about how their mental health is, but often very enabling messages. It's like enabling these problems. It's sort of almost making excuses for them to sit back into their comfort zone. What I think is quite admirable about the way you talk about your mental health issues, they're never enabling. They're never like falling back on them. It's always sort of like, okay, this is how I'm feeling right now. And then you go and take action trying to improve them. Like, how have we gotten to that stage? How do you feel you're always in a mindset to kind of keep stepping forward and keep stepping out your comfort zone, despite it being scary and despite maybe causing anxiety at times?
I think a lot of it, again, like, comes from experience. The first time it happens to you, it takes a long time to come out of. But at the same time, okay, so if I look back to the first time I was really struggling, I remember, and it's really hard to say this out loud because it's hard to explain, but I guess a lot of people can relate, is that I have had those thoughts of, it would be easier to not be around. I was very young, but I've had those thoughts, but equally I know that I wouldn't do that. So you've got two options. It's like, I can keep having these thoughts that I know aren't healthy, or I can do something. I guess that first time of having that thought and never wanting to think like that again, and then also taking action and seeing that actually it's going to be okay, like I am okay, and you do come out the other side. I think if the more and more you experience those, not necessarily always, I've only ever thought that one time, which is why I remember it so clearly. But then, you do end up in dark holes, and you do end up spiraling sometimes. But the more it happens and the more you come out of it, the more you realise, what, I've been here before and it sucked, but equally I came out and I was okay. So I guess each time you learn different ways, and you learn that, it's even like with relationships, you go through a horrible breakup, and back in the day, let's say it was your first ever one and you thought this person was the love of your life, it's the end of the world. It's awful. Your heart hurts. Like, how could they do this to you? I thought we were going to be together forever. And you look back and you almost laugh at it now. But at the time, it was awful. And I guess, over time, without sounding cold, like, as crap as it is that this thing maybe didn't work out, you're going to be okay. Each time I've met someone else and I've been just as happy. So you learn, I know that sounds harsh, but if it didn't work out, it didn't work out, and the same way with anything, like, the more you experience it, and I'm not encouraging you keep having breakups or you keep having, but it just goes to show that the more you deal with these difficult things, they don't go away. I remember having a conversation, funnily enough, with Elliot Upton.
Okay, yeah.
Years ago, and I was in Manchester, and I remember just feeling really shit and feeling like shit stuff was happening to me, and and all I could think about was all this crap that was happening, and I can't remember the words he said, but as you know, he's pretty brutal and honest, and he kind of just highlighted that I was almost playing the victim. And again, I'm not saying that people are playing the victim, but there comes a time when you're like, and I read this in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. He puts it really well. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And shit stuff can happen to you that is sometimes out of your control. Sometimes shit stuff happens to you and it is your fault. But whether it's your fault or not, it's always up to you how you deal with it. And that's always stuck in my head, actually. And I guess, again, the more you do it, the more you realize that actually you can do something about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be on your own. The more you realize there is stuff that can be done and you can come out the other side. So yeah, I guess again, just practice. But I'm not saying that those few times or even handful of times, aren't. It's tough. It is tough initially, but just knowing that you will be okay, and knowing that if you can just again, reach out for help, do something. It doesn't have to be that you have to pull yourself out the hole by yourself, but I
don't even think it necessarily sounds harsh, because it's one of those things where if you improve every time this thing happens to you, and every time you learn almost to be more resilient, it's just a level of confidence you gain. Like right now, I'd like to think I'm in the last relationship that I'll ever have. But I'm still in the in the mindset that I would be in the most okay situation, even though it's my best relationship ever. And it's not because this person's less important, quite the opposite. But it's this mindset of like, right, I'm more resilient now. I have more confidence in myself, more belief in me, that I will find a way to be okay with this, which is something that when I was 18 and went through my first breakup, I mean, you could write a sitcom on how my first breakup went. Like the amount of money that went on fancy dress at university in response to my first breakup. Like the day after I broke up, I had a birthday party and I went dressed as bananas in pajamas to try and make myself seem like I'm okay. I don't. Who does that and got incredibly drunk in the process?
Probably more people than you realise.
I remember vividly that night where I got really, really drunk. And have you ever had it where like you have a night where you sort of like block out a period of time in a night out where your memory just sort of goes, and then you all of a sudden sober up and you don't know what's happened for the last hour and a half. And I remember halfway through being in an argument with said girlfriend at the time, we were arguing away and I didn't know what we were arguing about. And I snapped in the system and but I didn't want to lose. So it was like, yeah, well, you're wrong. And I had absolutely nothing. I think you say over time, I think the more and more you go through these things, say the more confidence you get, the more resilient you get. And I love that quote by Mark Manson that you brought up about, that it is your responsibility. And it's a drill I learned from, I can't remember who I learned it from, it's probably a Luke Lehman one, where when I've got clients who don't even know they're stressed, or they've got so much in their head they can't even put a plan together. It's like, write down a list of everything that stresses you out, from my pen ran out of ink to my dog died and everything in between. And then take a piece of paper and write what's in your control and what's out of your control. And then from that list, that might make you feel better on its own because it just puts it in perspective. But then at least it's not saying don't stress about the things you can't control, because it's easier said than done. But it's this mindset of like, okay, what can I do to control the things I can control? And how do I change the perception of what I can't control? Whether that is going and speaking to somebody, whether it's getting a therapist, an outside opinion, or whether it's just working on how you see that thing. Like, have you ever heard of an event called the Waking Up Weekend?
No.
So it's a thing that John Georgeson helped run, and I went to it. It's in Bradford. It's absolutely phenomenal. Well worth going to if you ever get a chance. And they do this like 2-3 day seminar, and it's non-profit and it's the most well-organized thing I've ever been to in my whole entire life. And they build like lessons about how the brain works with these processes where they start like having eye contact with somebody, and they just build and build and build and build and build to the point where I won't say what happens at the end in case anyone listening to this or yourself goes on it, because it would probably scare you off going. But you start to reinforce these things, and you start to realize how much you're in control of. Like the two things that stuck out of my head about that Jill, is they talk about your brain having a process. So like you were saying earlier on about bad things happen to you and you're getting better at dealing with them and going out and getting more positive reinforcement and realizing you're going to be okay every time. It's like your brain has a process. Every action you've had up until this point allows your brain to think, if I do this, this happens.
Yeah.
And what you realize is like all you need, like action's what forms the process, but action's also what changes the process. So it's changing the perception to allow you to take more actions to get better, positive feedback. I always compared it to when I was young, terrible at chatting to the opposite sex, terrible. Nervous, scared, in a club, like, she's too attractive, I can't do it. So I went up and I was nervous, I was looking down, I was shy, and I got rejected nearly every time. So in my head, my process was, if I talk to her, I get rejected. So I just reversed even more, made myself even more anxious. Whereas what I changed was a date coach called Johnny Castell who said to me, "It's like, someone can only be a 5 out of 10 on looks alone. Your job then is to see if they're interesting enough to make the other 5." And that change in mindset allowed me to speak to more people with more confidence, get more positive reinforcement to the point where my process eventually started to change. But as I say, it's practicing and actually being able to get out your comfort zone and do those things. Like what if you look back now, we'll go into a few that I've listed out here from just knowing you for a number of years. But like, what are the things you feel has like made the biggest impact in terms of biggest leaps that you've taken, whether it's travel or career change or moves or something obscure that you feel has been like a breakthrough in terms of your confidence moving forward?
I'd say one of the biggest things was actually training for the triathlons and doing the ultra running and stuff that, I used to in fact, it was the swimming. I'm, without sounding big-headed, I can pretty much do any kind of sport activity and be pretty good at it. When I was doing sport growing up, I did cross country for county. I was county champion for javelin every single year, which is just crazy. I did heptathlon. I was always in the county relays. I was everything I did. I was in netball. I played football. I did cricket with the guys, everything. But the one thing I was always shit at was swimming. Never been good at swimming. I even cheated when I remember getting out of the pool before the length was finished and still somehow getting a badge. I don't, that wasn't on me. I got out, they still gave me the badge. It wasn't my fault. But I was just never good at swimming and always just had this thing against it, especially because I am quite competitive, don't like being bad at stuff. And I think something that really had an impact on my confidence was that I never got to where I wanted to get to in gymnastics. A lot of that was down to injury. A lot of it was down to circumstances in life. Some athletes make it to where they get to because of circumstances and everything else. It has to all come together. I just had to work, and eventually that had to take over because I needed to earn money. So I always felt like I don't know, I never got to where I wanted to, and that made me feel like I didn't do enough. So even in sport, fitness, and definitely when I started to enter into the social media world of fitness, I always felt like an imposter, especially when I moved into personal training. It was great that I was at UP because I learned so much, but equally coming away from UP and then becoming a PT, I felt like I didn't deserve to do that. So all of this stuff, anyway, had an impact on my confidence. Then when I started working with Red Bull on a New Challenge campaign, and I basically had to learn to swim in 3 months. I'm giving you the short version, but it was all the training started in January when it was cold. I had to be ready to swim in Glasgow in March time. The event never actually happened because of COVID, but I had 3 months to learn how to swim, and I knew that going in, I had to have a word with myself before I started the training for it. I just said, this is going to be shit. I'm going to hate this a lot. I'm not going to enjoy it. I don't enjoy swimming. There's going to be times when I don't want to go, but I really don't have the time to mess up. I don't have the time to not show up. I've got less than 3 months to learn how to swim. So when I first started going swimming, I was literally in the baby pool. And I think even more so for me, I felt like, again, without sounding big-headed, I looked like an athlete going into I had everything I needed. I fairly lean, like, always looked fairly athletic. So going into the pool, I looked like I'm about to go and swim for hours. But the reality is that I was in the baby pool, couldn't even swim 10 meters without panicking because I don't know how to breathe underwater. And it was like, in my head, I just had to laugh because, I guess a lot of it helped. A lot of my coaching has been teaching people how to be confident in the gym, females specifically, teaching them that no one is actually looking at you, no one cares what you're doing. They're that focused on their own training that they really don't care. So, that helped me to a certain extent. And I just had to, again, like I set those non-negotiables of, you have to just go and train, because you're not going to get to where you want to get to without going through this. So anyway, I spent hours being in a pool where I initially didn't enjoy it, didn't ever think I was going to be able to be any good at swimming. It's like the one thing I just thought I was always going to be shit at. Anyway, the event itself didn't happen, but then I realized I'd learned how to swim, and then I was like, okay, I've learned how to swim. If I can do that, what else can I do? So I thought I started running because of lockdown. Running was always something that I used to be good at, but hadn't for a while. Managed to pick that up quite quickly, and then I got a bike and thought, fuck it, I'll just do a triathlon. And then that was kind of September time, and I ended up doing 2 mini like sprint triathlons back to back. And I think coming away from that, it was like the one thing I just thought I'd never do, and the one thing I thought I wasn't great at it. I was still very, very slow when I did the swim. But the fact that I did it really just made me think, you know what, I can do more than I thought I could. And you get that bug then. Once you've been in your outside of your comfort zone and you've overcome it, it's a really good feeling. It's a much better feeling than doing something you're already good at. And so it just went on from there. My confidence then started to build, because I was like, okay, what more can I do? And then I signed up to an ultra marathon, which I'd not even done a marathon at that point. I hadn't furthest. I think the week before I actually agreed to do the ultra, I just celebrated the fact that I'd ran 14K, which was the furthest I'd ever ran. And that was tough. Like it was a one-time thing that I just managed to do. So the fact that I was then going to go on to do a 50K was just mental. But that confidence came from, again, being outside my comfort zone and realizing that actually doing that allows you to grow and allows you to prove to yourself, I guess, that you can actually do more things. So yeah, I'd say that was more so one of the more recent things. Definitely when I was younger, the gymnastics always helped, because it was just something that was quite cool and quite fun. When you told people, oh yeah, I can do this, it would be like, oh, that's really cool. So yeah, but definitely the whole being outside of your comfort zone thing, never really understood it until then.
Yeah, I always think one of the big things that sort of came out there, and time and time again, is finding tasks that sort of humble you. And I think that's really, really powerful, because it's like a client that comes to the gym who, like, how many times have you got a client that comes in and goes, I don't want to get too lean, I just want to drop 2-3 kilos, and then you drop that 3-4 kilos and you go, do you think I can get abs? And you can start to see that light bulb go in that sort of moment. And like, for me, like, nowhere near as hard as an ultra marathon, but I can actually show you here. I took up card magic as a hobby when I was in London, and I'm so rusty at it. I've started back up again. I've got my funky. I'm not going to show you anything now on the screen because it's mainly an audio podcast, but I've got my funky Avengers cards here. And like, that was a really humbling experience for me, because it's a really frustrating hobby in the sense of you start and you get really like that big kick of adrenaline, like, I can do a trick. And then it's like, I spend time trying to practice picking up 2 cards to make it look like the one. And like, someone will go, oh, can you show me something? And like, I've spent the last 6 months doing something that if I do it well, you'll never see I did it.
Yeah.
I can never brag about learning this thing because it's supposed to be hidden. And like, that for me, in a similar way to sort of getting in shape, it taught me that some of the joy of the process and learn to do stuff that's hard, regardless of the reward that necessarily is coming from it, right? And for most, there's a similar thing to your triathlon where, that's a huge accomplishment. You're not going to the Olympics tomorrow, but going from not liking swimming at all to be able to do a triathlon, it's an incredibly impressive feat. I mean, what's the training like for the ultra marathon? Like, how would you go from 14K to 50K?
Before I say that 100% one of the most valuable things that come away from pushing outside of your comfort zone is the journey. Like I didn't do the event I was supposed to do that I actually learned to swim for. Like that didn't happen. But what happened after that, because of that journey, it was a knock-on effect. So the journey is always where you're going to grow. The race or the event or the challenge that you've actually signed up for, that's just something you can show for the training that you've done or for the experience that you've had. Don't get me wrong, it was great, but I talk way more about the journey than the day itself. Your question, what was your question?
How do you even train for like going from 40K to 50K, like the ultra marathon? How does that even happen?
So obviously, what I did benefit from was I've done a lot of strength training. So I was already doing a lot of strength training for the triathlons that I'd just done. So that kind of I was already prepared physically. It just meant that I then had to build up on the running aspect, which really from 14 to 50 isn't as, I mean, it was hard, don't get me wrong, but it's not as difficult as it sounds. I had 9 weeks, but again, I'd already been like building up my running. I'd already done the strength and conditioning. It was more just about, honestly, it was more of a mind game than anything after that. So it just each week the runs just got bigger and bigger. So there wasn't really, again, like if I hadn't have done the strength training, if my body wasn't, primed, if I hadn't been doing the running before, that it wouldn't have even been something I thought about. It wouldn't have been worth it. Don't get me wrong. Even I don't know if you've watched the 14 Peaks on Netflix, but it goes to show. Well, it just goes to show like how powerful the mind is. But at the same time, like there are going to be some physical attributes that play a part in that. I wouldn't try and do what he did unless I'd already climbed a few mountains beforehand. But yeah, it just it literally was just the case of each week it just got bigger and bigger, and just learning about fueling for that long of a run, the commitment. I was training in winter. Like I did the actual run the end of January, and it was the first week that I'd moved to London, so I also had to do it in London virtually. Luckily I didn't end up doing it alone, thank God, because I don't know if I would have got lost, if I'm honest. But yeah, you just the biggest thing for me was the mindset of I listened to a lot of very long podcasts. I learned that I never would have thought running for like 2-3 hours would ever be a thing for me, but especially at that time with COVID and everything that was happening, I actually really, really appreciated it. So it came at the right time, I'd say.
I think there's a couple of interesting points I want to sort of bring up there. The second one will probably segue on to more the COVID and the business stuff. But I think it's such an important point there that where the mind goes, the body will follow. And I think that's a key thing to bring up, because I suppose like looking back at that question that's asked, there's a level of conditioning you'll get to relatively quickly. Like, do you need so much more to add another 10 miles onto your belt? But where people fall to bits in these things is getting themselves through the last 5-10 or miles, or getting through that halfway point. I know a lot of people in a marathon, successfully or unsuccessfully, and then you can see the difference in mentality from the people that succeed. One of the hardest things I ever did in my life was I walked the length of Wales for charity. So it was 182 miles from Prestatyn to Chepstow. Yeah. And I had 2 mates that had to do this with me, because my first mate bailed out halfway through. And then funny you mentioned getting lost. I spent the next 2 days walking on my own, realizing how lost in Wales I get. It all looks the same. So then finishing it with another mate. And that generally taught me like the moments where you just sort of like you want to do anything but. Similar to dieting, where you say, I want to do anything but dieting. I want to do anything but walk another mile and climb another stile, jump over another cow. And but you just keep going. I think that's, and it wasn't never like I was physically tougher, my aerobic health was tougher. It was just that I didn't have that sort of quit in me. But I suppose you may have answered this in the swimming question, but what with that and going through that and running that distance, what do you think allows you to have that mentality of keeping pushing through?
I think if you've committed, so I trained a lot for that day. It definitely helps having the social media account where people are literally watching you do it. And you've told this many people, but equally I'm also more than happy, and I've done it a couple of times where I've said, you know what, this isn't worth it. Sometimes it's a strong thing to do, to admit defeat, but I just felt like I could do it. I felt like I'd done the training. I'd weirdly enjoyed running for hours. I'd done, again, like I said, that year I'd shown to myself that there was a lot more that I could do. And even just listening to people like David Goggins and, listening to, I think I was listening to Matthew McConaughey at one point, like stuff like that, listening to people who, and getting, and hearing experiences of others who have pushed themselves further. But I guess I don't know. I think the training had just shown that, that was possible and that I really wanted to do it. And also, if you've already ran 20K, you don't really want to stop at that point. It's like, I've come so far. I've already ran the furthest I've ever ran. So I can't quit now. And yeah, there's been a lot of experiences like that, actually, where also, again, like going back to the whole thing, you're going to be okay. This is just temporary. So you're going to be fine coming out the other side. You might be in a pain for a good few days. The hardest thing for me is that it was very cold and wet the day we decided to do it. Annoyingly, the day after was bloody lovely. But the issue I've always had with longer runs is that my IT band would go, which is very, very painful. And I knew it was going to happen, but just was hoping that the training I'd done, it was actually getting much better. And a lot of the time, again, learning about like properly warming up and doing things to prevent it, I thought I'd be able to get through quite a lot of the run without it. But because it was cold and because I got stiff a lot quicker, and obviously I'm not running that fast, it kicked in about 20K. So I had to do, I actually only did 45K in the end. I didn't get to the 50, but it was still technically an ultra. So I honestly, it was the furthest I'd ever ran twice. So I didn't care that I hadn't done 50. I was like, 5K is not a big deal when it comes to that.
I think 25K when you're in pain. I think that's more impressive than 50K without it.
Exactly. At that point, I was like, you know what? I've done a lot. I wasn't really running towards the end. It was literally a hobble. And I think I realized in my head that the additional 5K at that pace would have taken like another hour, and it was getting dark. We were soaked, and it just wasn't worth it. So, I guess the training itself kind of prepares you mentally just as much as it does physically. So,
would you do another one?
I've thought about it. I'd like to do it when I've got a bit more time to prepare. I'd like to do it knowing that, what happened on the day. You don't know what's going to happen. If you've never done it before, again, experience always helps. I didn't think that my IT band were kicking 20K in, but hopefully if I was to do it again, I'd do it on when it's not cold and miserable, and I'm a bit warmer, and maybe if I have longer to train, I can potentially run at a better pace so I don't get stiff. So yeah, I think I wouldn't be against it. I'm not planning it anytime soon, but I think at some point I'm going to want to start to challenge myself a bit more.
So you mentioned obviously training for this throughout lockdown and throughout, when all the gyms were shut. And one of the things I was like, it was interesting seeing how personal trainers reacted online when gyms closed down around the world. And the UK had gyms shut, I think, a little bit longer than we had here in Hong Kong. But you seem to keep training throughout, whether it was a live Instagram workout you did or whether it's training for this. Do you think pivoting your training to something that isn't imitation gym workouts helped you stay consistent throughout this time? Or do you think you've got yourself into such a rhythm that you would have continued regardless of that goal?
Consistent for what?
Consistent training in general. I found a lot of people during lockdown, they were trying so hard to do, like, I'm going to do my usual workout, but instead of doing 5 reps on incline dumbbell press, I'm going to do 500 reps of floor press with my 4 kg dumbbells. It just never
I see what you mean now. Honestly, I couldn't do it. I couldn't train in my apartment. I couldn't do the weight training. Even the live workouts that I held, a couple of minutes before it was about to go live, I was lying on my sofa regretting the fact that I'd even said I'd do it, but I had to because there were people there. And you know what? Every time I was so grateful that I had that. I was really glad that I felt that I ended up doing them. Those live workouts kept me more accountable than it did the people that were following it. So I needed that just as much as those people did. I couldn't do it in my apartment. I tried. I did a bit. But that's where the running started. I was like, I just need to get out. And I think a lot of people did it for that reason. It wasn't that they were just it wasn't that they were necessarily trying to stay active. I mean, we know the benefits of being active, but it was more that mindset and being able to just be away, that so many people took it up. So yeah, like definitely, I think I've definitely learned to be more open about the style of training that I do. I'm always going to love strength training. I really, really enjoy it. I've realized that even more so in the last month or so. But I've also, really enjoyed trying new things, seeing what my body can do, focusing less as well. You have to have different goals over time. I think it's just fun, but also it's also really interesting to see what your body can do. It's good for your mind just as much as it is your body to try new things, to move in different ways. But the thing I love about strength training is that no matter what I choose to do, whether it's a triathlon, swimming, these functional fitness events that you end up doing, like strength training will always support that. Whether it's always going to be maybe different styles of strength training, different methods, different approaches, but it will always be like the kind of support system to everything else. It's crazy actually, the more I learn about strength training, and I always think back to my gymnastics and how we did so much conditioning, but I never went into a weights room. Not I mean, we went in there when we weren't supposed to mess about, but never actually did any strength training. And I look back and think, God, if only I had. Like I can't even imagine what kind of athlete I would have been had I have had that. So yeah, I do think that being consistent, I mean, the most important thing with being consistent is you have to be enjoying it, right? You're not always going to enjoy it every day, but you have to want to do it. So to make it as fun as possible and for you to do it long term, I guess, like for me, definitely doing different things and training for different things, having a reason to train that isn't just about physique, because don't get me wrong, that can always be a thing, but over time you kind of know that's just something that you know how to do. It just happens as a result of what you're doing. So yeah, I think having different things to try and to train for will always help, sure.
I think when it comes to physique as well, I think regardless of, even if your ultimate goal is to build a better physique, which most people listen to this, it probably is, following us. I think there's the element of, it takes a long time. It takes years and years to build a truly good physique, not just to get lean. And while you can diet down in 6, 10, 12, 20 weeks and look pretty good, to build physique takes so long. And I find that the biggest drop off, we don't have a weight loss problem in this world, we have a weight management problem. And the people drop off and don't stay consistent long term because focusing on your physique when you see the scale coming down, you see a new vein, you see your muscles appearing, you look better by the day is quite motivating. But then when it's like the scale's going up, the hard work I'm doing is getting hidden by the month as I'm starting to like build my calories up. If you're focused so much on how you look in the scale, you're never going to stay the course. You're going to backtrack really quickly. And I think the people that end up building muscle long term are the people like yourself who sort of goes, I'm into this I want to get a stronger deadlift. I want to get a certain amount of chin-ups. I want to be strong enough to run this ultra marathon or this functional fitness event. And over time, that consistency of training means that as long as you're fueling that and supporting that with your nutrition, you come back to diet again in a year or 2 years' time, and you look better for it, rather than your sole focus is in between diets is body composition entirely, because it's hard to keep that completely as a mental driver enough to push it. Like bodybuilders, hardcore bodybuilders do it, but I think most clients I've had, they want to gain muscle, but they don't really care that much to dedicate as much of the time as necessary to it. Do you find the same thing with your clients post-diet?
Yeah, it's funny because post UP, that's all I knew when it came to being a personal trainer. But because when I became a PT, I had a lot of people coming to me who had maybe gone through, not necessarily with UP, but had gone through a transformation, but then put the weight back on, or been too scared to do anything because they might put the weight back on.
Yes.
And obviously that's not sustainable and it's not enjoyable either. And a lot of these people were coming to me and I was like, hang on, more and more people were coming to me with these issues and I'd never experienced that side of things before. So then my job was like, okay, how can I get these people feeling good about themselves? Obviously, I love strength training, so that was always the main reason why people came to me, was to learn how to lift and to be confident lifting. So luckily, they did want that, but they also obviously wanted to feel good about the way they looked. So it then started to become my thing as a personal trainer to find a way for them to achieve both. And obviously that is a more sustainable approach. It isn't about before and afters. Don't get me wrong, and I say this often, there is nothing wrong with wanting to change your physique, providing it's done the right way, providing it's not your only focus. You'd be lying if I genuinely believe you'd be lying if you said that wasn't a thing. But I think sometimes I love that people are feeling more body confident and talking about, people being in different shapes and sizes. I 100%, I'm so glad that that's happening. And, health isn't about just having abs and being super lean. In fact, a lot of the time for some people, it's the opposite. However, I have noticed over because of that's happening, people are almost a little bit, they feel a bit silly saying that they want to be a bit leaner or be a bit more defined. And I always say you do not need to feel silly about that. It's just that it shouldn't be the only thing that matters. So for me, my clients these days, they want to get stronger. They know that their physique will change because of that, like you said, with the right fueling and some adjustments in maybe their lifestyles, but it's not the only focus, which is nice to see. I do believe that I get those people because of the message that I put out. So, there are still a lot of people who still think and are still kind of so worried about their physique, and it
has a huge impact on their lives, and they're not quite ready to come to someone like myself, or maybe too scared to approach someone like myself for that reason. So you attract what you put out, right? So there's still going to be bubbles of people who are still in that place, but hopefully the more we can get people coming this way, the better.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in regards to what you're saying there about almost people feeling silly about talking about wanting to be in shape. And I think as I said, like, I don't think I've ever really had someone where the actual goal wasn't to look better naked. And it's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's done in a sensible way and move forward. I think the risk of going off too much, without going too much on a tangent, I think we're in this weird place in 2021 where, in order to get a positive message across, the people that are most emotionally fueled by a topic tend to go way too far in order to eventually find a middle ground. I think that's the thing we're seeing with the sort of anti-diet movement. Like, I am generally happy for anyone who wants to be big and beautiful, or somebody who says, I don't really care about abs, I just want to be healthy. And as you say, some people who get mega lean is far from healthy, especially their prolonged diet, going from show to show or shoot to shoot or diet to diet. But I think at the other under end of the spectrum now, we're getting a lot of people that are going, it's a bad thing to want to be lean. And it's almost projecting their insecurities on the rest of Instagram. It's like saying my goal is more important than your goal. And I think that's where we get a murky territory. I think that's where, like, it's accounts like yourself, where it's like, no, this can be done healthily. And if you want this, it's okay to want this. Yeah. But like, you just put it in the bigger picture, the grand scheme of things, I suppose.
Yeah, the thing is, the stuff that like, for example, the stuff that I talk about, and the way to achieve that sustainable, healthy lifestyle, to be stronger, to be happy about the way you look, to eat healthier, to whatever, to get stronger, all that stuff is actually really boring.
Yeah.
Like, I say the same stuff over and over again. So the reality is, when it comes to Instagram and social media, you you kind of have to go to the extreme for people to hear. And you're right, like, it then creates these kind of cults. It's the same with, like, I'm never going to post a workout every single day, because that's not how you get stronger. You don't get stronger by following a new workout every day. You don't I don't post clickbait, because that's not, there's lots of ways I could grow my Instagram following if I wanted to. I know how social media works. I know how to market myself, or I know how to get a huge amount of followers in a short space of time. But I just want to talk about the stuff that matters. I don't want to talk, if that's not the most exciting thing in the world, I don't care. I'm just going to keep pushing the message that is important. But I think you can, like you said, we could go off on this topic quite a bit, but there are a lot of accounts that have this almost cult-like following, because, again, like, if you're to as an example, if you've got someone telling you that you can eat donuts if you want to, and you like eating donuts, you're going to follow that person and you're going to listen to that person because that's what you want. And again, like, if someone came to me and said, I want to get leaner, but I love donuts, it'd be like, great, we'll just make sure that you can eat donuts and get leaner. But the message that I'm giving isn't that exciting. It's like, yeah, well, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit, but you can still eat donuts and get leaner, just don't eat loads of them. The message is so boring. And I'll keep repeating that same message, because it's not that difficult. Like, the stuff that, the answers that people want, or the solutions for a lot of people, aren't difficult. It's just not easy to follow. So it's simple, but it's not easy. So yeah, again, like, you can go on.
Yeah, exactly. I would find that I sometimes look at my page and the message I put across, and it's like, I feel like that parent telling their kid no for something, in the sense of, it's like, everything's based on pros and cons. Like, my rather than like, have a donut and lose weight, it's like, yeah, you can eat donuts and lose weight. But it'll probably suck because you'll be so hungry the rest of the day. Make your choice.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's not sexy, but that kind of leads us quite nicely into, you talk about building a brand with integrity, and the sort of tagline of this episode was getting out your comfort zone. And I can imagine spending years in marketing, which is a booming industry, probably more so now than it was even when you did it, and potentially very lucrative and very secure and all that sort of stuff. What made you make a really big leap into what is a very unstable career of personal training? Like what made you make that jump, and how did you find that transition?
Yeah, it's I enjoy talking about this, to be honest, because at the time, like, I didn't realize it, but at the time, but I look back and I'm kind of proud of what I did. Again, I'd spent a long time, coming from a family that, I've never been, I want to put this the right way. My family wouldn't care what I did. And I mean that in a nice way. They'd love me whether I was on benefits and, didn't really have much of a job. There was no expectation for me to do much. So it coming from that kind of family and being where I am now, I'm a bit of a black sheep. I am completely different to the rest of my family. So, but my drive was always that I did want to do better. I did want to do more, and I didn't want to end up living on benefits. I didn't want to end up staying in Crewe where I'm from. And again, no disrespect to anyone that does that, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I'd worked really hard to get to, I never knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be anything and everything. I wanted to be a paramedic. I wanted to be a vet. I wanted to, honestly, I've gone through all kinds of phases, but I just always knew I wanted to do well. And I, like, over time, like, I ended up in marketing. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. It just kind of happened. I could go through that story, but it'll take a long time. And eventually, I got the job at UP, and I got into the fitness industry that way. And I loved being there. Like, I didn't realize at the time, but I was editing articles from, like, all of the trainers across all of the gyms. I was taking in all this information. I was watching people be trained. I was talking to the clients, talking to you guys, watching the videos that we'd filmed, all this stuff, all this information that I was taking in. And I was always good with people, and I kind of got my, I'm very good at getting stuck in everything. I'm a bit of a, jack of all trades type person. Like, I'm not really particularly great at one thing. I'm good at a lot of things. And again, I always knew I wanted to work for myself. Just didn't really, because I was never that great at anything in particular, it was really hard to pinpoint that. And then I remember getting the job at My Protein, and I was really, again, like, I've always felt a bit like, I don't know how I don't know how this is happening. I'm not that great at this. And I was global social media manager at My Protein. When I got the job, I was pretty impressed. But then I got the job, and I was like, actually, no, I am doing this, and I can do this. And then I realized that social media wasn't the only thing I wanted to do. I wanted to, again, like, have my hands in all the pies, and I wanted to do marketing rather than just social media. So I applied for head of marketing within My Protein in the bars and snacks category, and I got the job. And I remember getting the job and being, like, so proud of myself, but equally I was a bit like, is that it? Like, I've kind of achieved what when I was younger, thinking, I want to do well for myself. I got into that title that sounds really impressive. And it was kind of like, I was thinking about it long term, and I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to do long term. And I've been, and as this was all happening, my social media following was growing. A lot of people were asking me for advice. I posted my own personal journey. That's all I ever did. But I had thought about it and thought, I've been a gymnastics coach as well for years. So I've always been able to coach people and get the best out of people. And I was really good with people. Even again, like looking back, I was naturally good at the psychology behind how people work and how to teach different people. As well as I was really good at sales. So I did sales. I was at a call center for 4 years. That was my first job. And again, the stuff that you gain from a job like that all helps. And when you're a PT, the knowledge of programming, actually training people, if you train yourself, you've kind of got that. Yes, you can learn more, but you've got the basics. It's all the other stuff that a lot of PTs don't have. Whereas I realized when I had that light bulb moment at My Protein, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to be a PT. I realized that I had all the skills already to create that business. So what I did was straight away, I decided I was going to go into it full time. I wasn't just going to do it half-assed. I know, and I think what people don't realize, again, I talk about that I didn't come from money. In my head, even though I do well for myself now, I'm comfortable, I've always got this mindset of I used to live in a council estate. So money for me is never a given. If I run out of money, I don't have a backup. So that was always my thing. And going into being fully self-employed full-time, was a big risk, especially when I was coming from a salary. But what I did was I got a job that allowed me to have time. Working at My Protein was a big commute, and I just never had any time around that. So not only did I need to get my qualification, but I wanted to start. So I decided in March, let's say, I can't remember what the year because COVID throw my years out. It was March time, and I decided I'm going to start full time in September. So I started my course. I started to decide on what kind of service I was going to provide. So first of all, I needed to know what product, pricing, all that stuff, the easy stuff, really. I didn't do it alone. I reached out. I asked for, what other people were doing. I knew that I was going to be, I was new and I just wanted to be busy. So I put that together. I then realized that, again, I had so many people on my social media asking me for advice. So anyone who asked me a question, anyone who commented on a post or showed any kind of interest whatsoever of being healthier, being fitter, being stronger, I would drop them a message and tell them. So even though I hadn't announced it to the world or whatever, I would message them directly and say, look, I'm actually going to be a PT in September. Are you interested in being coached by me? And a lot of people said yes. And I just collected emails from March till September. I had all these contacts from doing that. So as I was getting my qualification, which I knew, and having someone like Nick Mitchell being your boss, I knew that the qualification was just a formality. So I think that's really important to know. A lot of young PTs spend a lot of time stressing about the qualification that they need to get. Obviously, that's really important. But there's lots of other things that are just as important. Once you need to know what to do once you've qualified. So I think the thing that I had was that I knew I had to get clients. I knew I had to have a bit of almost like a product launch for myself. I was planning how I'm going to announce or am I going to tease, if you're launching a product, you tease the product. Yeah. So even when I knew I had this timeline in September, I was building up to that. So I worked on the product. I thought about the type of PT I wanted to be. I was pretty clear on that from the start. Anyway, I wanted to help people be stronger, feel more confident. Again, talking about my family, I've always wanted to be able to help them be healthier and whatever. So this gave me the chance to do it for other people. And I guess, again, when I think back to the decision of being a PT, everything in my life led up to that. Like I look back and I'm like, everything happens for a reason. Like this was supposed to happen, because I've always at heart been a PT. Like it came so natural to me. So yeah, I just spent all of that time I had my product. I knew the kind of person I wanted to be, personal trainer I wanted to be. I knew the message I wanted to put out. So I just started putting out that message without actually saying I'm going to be a PT. More so because I guess there was a part of me that was also scared to announce it too soon. So I wanted to build it up and do all the groundwork first, so that when I announced it, I knew I had everything ready. I could what I did was when I had qualified, I think I qualified in like August. So then I knew I was going to start on the gym floor in September. So then I started contacting these people that had reached out. I obviously announced it on social media, and that got a really good response. But again, it was because I was putting out a message that it didn't matter that I wasn't a PT.
Yeah.
I was putting out the information that people wanted to hear, the message that I knew was going to attract the right people, and I was consistent with that. So when I then announced, okay, I'm going to be a PT, guys, the response was great, and I'd put a lot of work in. So even before I started working, I was doing consultations in coffee shops. I was writing for a Manchester blog at the time as my job to earn the money whilst I became a PT, and I would invite them in for consults at WeWork. So I was like, oh, this is my office. It's really nice, free coffee, whatever. It was great. I did some in the Sainsbury's cafe though, because it was right next to the gym. So, I made it work. So I was doing all this before I'd even started. So before day one, I'd done all of the sales pitch. I'd done all the consults. I'd done all the reaching out. I collected all these emails, and you don't need to. I know a lot of people will think, oh, you've got a big following. You don't need a big following to do this. You could do this with a few hundred people, providing those people are engaging and they've been listening to the message that you've been putting out. I think a lot of people will use that as a bit of an excuse, especially if listening to someone like myself who's maybe got a bit of a bigger following. But I didn't have a huge following back then. It wasn't as big as it is now. And even now, it's not that big in comparison to others. So, I worked on building my business before I'd actually started. And then when I announced it, it was ready. I had it all ready. I reached out to the right people, put a lot of work in, I guess. And it was funny because when I started, I remember getting and I'll say this, there was a lot of the male personal trainers who weren't happy that I was busy. There was a lot of, how are you getting this? How are you doing this? It's like, I've worked hard. Like just because I'm a new PT does not, and this was coming from people who would be sat in the staff room watching movies and like doing fuck all basically.
I remember quite vividly when you decided to become a PT. So I remember I haven't spoken to you that much. Every now and again, she had a Insta comment since she left GP. But I just remember thinking like you said, it was very clear that was the path we were eventually going to go down. The content was so clear that I thought this is definitely the right thing for her to do, and that's why I made a point to reach out to you at the time, just like, ever need help? Like, I feel it's disappointing coming from being a male personal trainer, hearing that there is that still that sort of backlash, because I think it's already a difficult, less so because as it's growing, but already a difficult industry for women to get into for, I think, a number of reasons. And I think there's always that element of a lot of female clients want to come in feeling more comfortable being told what to do by a man, and then most guys want to come in and train with the guys who've got bigger arms than them. It's already a difficult platform for a girl to get into compared to a guy. And I think more support needs to be for the right people to come in and make an impact and show a message that only women can do in this industry and help an audience that may not reach out to other people.
Yeah.
There certainly should be more support. It's disappointing to hear that you did get
I think one of the biggest things that I'll say as well is that you can have all of the tools, but I knew I had to, like, I was throwing myself in at the deep end. I had to earn enough money to support the lifestyle that I'd already created. So I had no choice but to make it work. And I think that mindset really helps. A lot of, and again, like, especially like young female PTs or wannabe PTs, a lot of the time it's confidence. A lot of the time it's feeling like an imposter, feeling like, oh, well, I don't know anything compared to other people. It's like, yeah, but we all started there. It's being one, accepting that is always going to be the case. There's always going to be someone who's doing better than you, but to learn from those people and to know, like, I was always honest from the start. Every consult I had before I was even a PT, I would say to them, and they kind of knew a bit about me anyway, which was always really handy. But I would say, I'm not the most knowledgeable PT. I'm obviously a newly qualified. But what I will do is, if I don't know the answer to a question, I'm going to find out. I'm never going to give you advice that I'm unsure of. I'm always going to keep learning. And I think one of the most underrated things as well, and again, like, this is something that, without playing to stereotypes, females are better at, is the support and the empathy and the compassion. We are more emotional creatures, so actually that's probably the most important thing when it comes to being a PT. You can have all the knowledge in the world, if you can't talk to a person, relate to a person, be there for them when they need to be, you're not going to be the best PT. So yeah, I think there's so much. And the final thing I'll say from a business aspect is, there is always going to be, and you have to know this, you have to believe that there will always be people who want to be trained by you. It doesn't matter what time of year is. It doesn't matter what's going on. The fitness industry is huge. People want to be healthier. There is always people out there. So if you just keep going and going, like, I don't care what time of year it is. If I need clients, I know I can get them. And I think it's just having that mindset the whole way through and just working for it. And yeah, it's something I want to get into. I have coached and mentored quite a few female PTs now, and it's definitely something I'll move into, because there is that again, you've got amazing mentors. I had Mark Coles, you've got Phil Lerner, you've got people like Nick Mitchell who you can listen to. But is a young female wannabe personal trainer gonna want to go to them and reach out and feel like they're even at that stage to listen to someone like that? Like, I think there's a bit of in between. Again, it's that I don't have the knowledge that they have, but I have something else. I have something else I can offer. So
yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, when you're looking at imposter syndrome, I think the way I've always flipped it is that, because it never goes away. I've shared a post from a trainer today saying that if you're a new PT, you're going to have imposter syndrome, and I'm just like, well, I'm almost 11 years. I'm almost 11 years in the game, and I still have it. And I think, but I'm very grateful for it, because it's my imposter syndrome that keeps me learning, that keeps me seeking out mentors. Like, one more thing I would say about your business for in your way is, like, you mentioned earlier on about when you were looking to try and find what you wanted to do for a living, that you were a bit of a jack of all trades and you couldn't focus on one. And then when you started talking about the business, everything, like, about building the personal brand, building the business, it was also very driven and very clear. So if there's a female PT watching this, it doesn't know where to start, or a male PT, I suppose, like, when it comes to building a personal brand and filling that gap that a lot of PTs don't have in terms of the marketing and branding side of it, like, how do you start? How did you create that product? How did you create that presence online that when you launched, there was an audience?
Yeah, honestly, it's just, and this is probably one of the hardest things that for people to do, but it's just about being you. Yeah. I think that's the most underrated thing, because there is no one else like you. And I know it sounds really cheesy, but there are lots of PTs. There are always going to be loads of PTs. There are going to be PTs that do stuff better than you. There are going to be PTs who have more knowledge. They might have a better phone than you to film better content. They might, but they'll never be you. And again, this is why it doesn't matter how many followers you have. If 5 people can relate to you or feel that they can reach out to you, then that's all that matters. And you have to be, and the easiest way to be as passionate as and authentic, and again for people to relate to you, is to just be yourself. If you're trying to pretend to be someone else, I spent some time, again, when I started being a PT, I spent time looking at what everyone was doing and getting a bit obsessed about it and feeling like I needed to do more of that or more of this, and I found myself constantly just chasing something that I wasn't as good at, whereas I was like, I'm just going to do what I do, and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep being better at being me, and the right people will then come to me. So one, it's just about knowing, understanding who you are, who you want to be. The easiest way to say it is, if you need to know what your message is, I guess. You need to, and again, this is the work that I'd already done. I knew that I wanted to help people be stronger. So people know me people come to me because they want to get stronger and learn how to lift. They also come to me because they feel that they can talk to me because I'm more honest and open, and I talk about the highs as much as the lows as much as the highs. So that, and again, like every now and then I'll ask my followers, why do you follow me? And the message is always the same. So it shows me that I know that I am still putting out the right message, and I'm doing that. So I guess, yeah, it's hard to narrow it down, but I honestly, I just keep pushing the same message. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep be as open. Talk about your own journey. Like if you're training and you're going through hard times, talk about that. People want to hear more about that than they do about you achieving a PB every now and then. People want to hear about the boring stuff more than they do, I'm doing this incredible thing. The reason I started out blogging in the first place, like I used to write blogs years ago, like I want to say 10 years ago, and it wasn't for anyone. There was no one following me at the time, but I started writing it because I was doing fuck all, and Instagram was kind of coming about, and everyone was talking about their holidays and buying houses and all this, and I was just hanging out with my cats. And I was like, I want to talk about the boring stuff. I want to have a space where people can follow, like see that people are still just sat drinking a cup of tea, haven't got any money. I was shit with money, so I was like, I'm not doing anything that exciting. I'm not buying loads of I wanted to be normal as possible and talk about being as normal as possible, and I've kind of tried to stay with that. I appreciate that I am fortunate to do more stuff these days and buy things and whatever, but I will always still talk about the fact that I spend, I don't go out that much. I spend a lot of time lying in bed watching Netflix. I'm not that exciting. And so, yeah, I think that is just knowing who you are, knowing what you want to do, and just talking about that and continue to talk about that. Because again, social media, the algorithms mean that everyone doesn't see that post that you do on that day. So if you then think that you need to talk about something else the following week, like people, if you're sick of hearing what you're saying, if you talked about that message enough, more people will start to get it. If you only mention something every now and then, a handful of people are going to see it.
Yeah.
So if you're bored of your own message, it means you're doing the right thing.
I think there's so many interesting things that you mentioned in there. I think like me coming out of UP and starting building my own brand over the last 7-8 months, and similar thing. Like you start looking at what everyone else is doing, and like two things that stuck out to me. I had a client that got a great result a few years ago who said to me, he goes, the time I started following the diets when you told me your coach gave you a pizza when you were prepping for your show, because it made you normal. And I reckon like a lot of things other people feeling comfortable to reach out to you is like, I'm a lazy person that sits and puts my feet up and watches Netflix all day and sometimes doesn't want to train. And then you've got a trainer that just talks about their PBs all the time. And then you've got Sam who talks about the days that she doesn't want to do it, but does it anyway.
Yeah.
It's very, very like that is something that makes you want to reach out. And in a similar way, like you talked about, putting you out there is more important than the crazy production value. Like I finally have an office, first time in my life. I've got a couple of ring lights, things like this. But like when I first started out, it was like, I remember my first video that I ever put on YouTube, it cut my top of my head off. Mm-hmm. And like, that's terrible. But like, it's just like the production value will get slowly, one piece at a time, get better as you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You can't do it all straight away. You're never going to be perfect, or you never will be perfect, but there is always going to be something you can do better. So learning to accept that, you've got to start somewhere, and then you'll build on it from there. Ask for help as much as possible. If you don't know the answer to it, go and ask someone. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's loads of advice like I want to be able to give, and at some point I'll focus more on that and do more of that. I'd like to do more of that and help more people. But yeah.
So I'll just finish off with a couple of closing questions, little short, quick fire ones, and then we'll let you get on with your day. So what at the moment, what are like the top 3 things you're most grateful for right now in 2021?
I'm grateful for honestly something I'm grateful for the fact that I can train. I had a good few months of feeling shit, not being consistent with training, and I know how much that has an impact on me and my mental and physical health. So I'm grateful that I've been consistent with that again, and I'm feeling much more better about myself. And it has such an impact when you're a PT. If your training isn't on point, or it doesn't have to be perfect, but if your training is slacking, it's going to rub off on everything. And for me, if you think, if I'm not training, I don't have content to film, I don't have anything to talk about for social media, then it impacts my business. Then I can't promote my coaching. If you are not inspiring yourself, you cannot inspire others. So it has a huge impact on so many things. So I'm grateful for that.
I think the coach community, we talked about imposter syndrome earlier on. I do think that as much as we span it in a positive light, where it gets negative is things like that, where I was going through a huge training rut at the start of this year. I wasn't in a good place, and my training just fell to bits. And because of that, it has a knock-on effect of feeling less confidence with your clients. That makes you feel more of an imposter for doing your job, and that's when it becomes paralyzing. And when I got myself in a better place, in a better environment, and I start to love training again, it's amazing how content ideas, not just being able to film content, just like feeling like when I've got a client asking me questions, I don't feel as much like a fraud. Allows me to learn more.
And even just like you notice, if you're tired and your client, you're standing there training someone and they're struggling, you're more likely to be like, it's okay, don't worry, like, it's one of those days, you're not going to push them as hard. If you're feeling like, if you're pushing yourself and you're feeling good about it, you're feeling strong, you want them to feel the same way. So then you're going to egg them on a bit more and you're going to support them in a different way. It honestly, as a PT, if you're training, I'd say probably my number one advice normally to any new PT is to get a coach. Have a coach, not just to keep your training on point, because that for me was the hardest thing when I became a PT. My training went out the window. I was fucked all the time. And again, like it has such.
And that's more common than you think as well. People listening to our PTs think, oh, the PTs love to train. Oh, I know so many PTs that train in
It's the opposite. When you first start, it's the hardest thing. So that's my main bit of advice. But going back to being grateful, I guess currently, I don't know really. I guess I should be grateful for a lot of things.
I think training is a good one. So what's next? What's next for you? What's the next push out your comfort zone for Sam?
On a business aspect, I'm just currently just building my online subscription. So I've just launched essentially, and this has taken a lot of time to get to, but I wanted to give out affordable strength training programs that would make sense. So what I mean by that is to scale a strength training program, it's quite hard because if they just start at a random place, it doesn't make sense. Whereas the platform that I've got now, it allows anyone to start at any time, but they'll always start from day one. And that's perfect for me. It's what I've wanted to do. I've wanted people to start from the basics and work up, so they've got this journey. so I've started that. Again, it's still early days, and I'm very good at almost self-sabotaging. Sometimes I've got loads of ideas, but sometimes I start them and it never seems to follow through. So my focus is to keep on that, and to keep building that, to keep making it better. I then, alongside that, I'm launching one-off programs that people can buy. So I'm just trying to keep building that online business. Again, like with COVID and stuff, it does make the online stuff you have to have something that's going to be solid. Like if we can't go into gyms, then you need something that for me is now my main source of income. Then the coaching on top of that is just because I enjoy it. I coach at the Foundry because I enjoy it. I don't do it for the money. I just like coaching people. So there's that. Definitely in a slightly longer term basis, as I mentioned before, I really want to start helping specifically female PTs, young PTs, or people who are wanting to do a similar thing to what I did, move, change careers and move into that. I think there's a big gap for that. So that's on a business aspect. Personally, honestly, it's not always about being outside your comfort zone. Right now, I've needed to find a place where I'm comfortable. I've been out of my comfort zone for a long time since moving to London. So I'm just finding my feet and focusing on the things that, just the simple things, being healthier and looking after my physical, mental health. So yeah, like nothing crazy right now. I think there will definitely be a challenge at some point, but the challenge has been London for the last few months. So.
Of course. So before finishing off with the silly question, just because you segued nicely into that. So if anyone wants to find you and find out more about your story, and I totally vouch, everyone listening, go follow Sam because it's well worth it. Where can people find you and learn about these things that you're building over the course of the next few months and years?
Sure. Honestly, the easiest place is Instagram. Sam says _PT, so like Simon says, but with Sam obviously.
Why isn't that my handle? Why isn't that my handle? No, should be.
Don't. That'd be weird.
Yeah. Well, how many people that could try and follow you accidentally follow me? By that case, I just get the remainers of proxy.
Yeah, I see what you're doing. Instagram. I've got all my links to my online programs and my. I've recently started a weekly email where I just thoughts, to be honest, just personal thoughts that I felt like sharing. So I thought I'd make it a thing. So yeah, you can find pretty much everything on there.
So the last silly but probably the most important question, as it's that time of year, what is your favourite Christmas movie? Yes.
Not that festive, if I'm honest, Simon, but honestly, the first one that comes to my head is Elf, because I just think Will Ferrell is hilarious.
I think for the non-festive viewer, then Die Hard has got to be the number one.
I don't think I've even seen Die Hard, if I'm honest. The thing I care about the most today, as we speak, is that Spider-Man is out today, and I'm going to watch it later.
Is that today?
Yeah.
Okay. That's very much my doing. All right, cool. I'm definitely sending you a Christmas movie list though, because this is absolutely sacrilege. But on that note, thank you so much. This has been a really, really enjoyable chat. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for coming on. And to say, go follow Sam. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.